in funding schemes, oftentimes we see a coupling between the concept of open innovation and open science. And we were kind of wondering and curiously discussing this, if this is necessarily a good thing, and why nobody was talking about consequences that might come up when you couple these two concepts. And we talked about it and we thought, well, maybe we should write an essay about talking exactly about that. And in writing so, we found that there is basically 3 of these consequences if you couple open innovation and open science that we think aren't really talked about.
So we think the first consequence of this close coupling might be that change advocates within the scientific community get alienated from the open science movement. So you can say the most dogmatic open scientists might not want to play along if it gets too cozy with open innovation. The second negative consequence might be that maintenance-oriented collaborations between science and practice might also get marginalized. For example, universities might want to work with museums or archives which don't have anything to do with innovation, but still they might want to get funding. Third negative consequence is that it might actually decrease the dependence of science on profit-oriented platforms. So if you think if these close collaborations between open innovation and open science become too intense, at some point, all the equipment and software that science needs is provided by these for-profit platforms. This creates, we think, problematic dependencies.
My mother-in-law is actually a professor at a medical school, so she would be just fine with the text as it is. But if I had to explain it to her in very short, I would say, well, make sure in your next open research proposal you have enough innovation speak in it to get funding.
The start of this project actually fell into the same time that I started working with Sascha. So when I moved to his research group, and at some point we started talking about this apparent consensus around the idea of coupling open innovation and open science. So we saw this idea popping up everywhere in research papers, but also in policy proposals. And we found it a bit odd that no one is actually proposing the opposite or even discussing why this might not only be a good idea.
So basically, we both did work in the open science community, but we also both know people from the open innovation community. And these used to be 2 very different communities. And so we were kind of puzzled by the fact that these 2 concepts that the communities look at now get bundled. And we were like, well, these people and these people, they're now the same. What happens if that would be the same? And we thought, well, there's only a couple of people who are parts of both communities in a way. And so we thought that's interesting. We should discuss this and why this is happening.
We think that in our field, so organizational management studies, we need actually more real academic debate. And we think in this genre, real debates where you kind of question fundamental assumptions of the field are not really possible. And we are quite happy that we think with our article we achieved to at least start a real debate with provocative arguments on both sides.
And we're happy about the fact that basically moments after the article was published, we already had a couple of comments in our inbox about people saying, well, why do you cite me in that context? So it actually happened that we saw a debate or are seeing a debate, and I think there's more articles coming talking about exactly what we try to have as a debate. I think it's a healthy thing as a community to not only say, well, here's another article I wrote, but also saying, well, this argument I see it a little bit differently. Turnaround time. Reviews were actually very helpful in crafting the argument, so we had to go through several rounds, but they were super quick.
We think there are at least 3 managerial audiences here. On the one hand, managers of research funding institutions. The second is managers in research institutions. And the third group are managers of open innovation projects in, for example, private sector firms. We adapted a catchphrase from George Orwell's Animal Farm. And we would say what best fits our article is the saying that all forms of openness are equal, but some are more equal than others.